Hello and welcome back to our first book chat of 2021. I'm Mandy Greaves and today I'm talking with Nicola Arvidson. Welcome, Nicola, and thank you for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks, Mandy.
Okay, today Nicola and I are going to be chatting about a truly remarkable true story. However, before we chat about the book, Nicola, could you tell me and the people watching a little bit about your role here at the Diocese and the path that's led you to this position, please?
Sure. I'm the head of compliance, legal and risk, and I have a legal background and I've always had a strong social conscience. So coming to work for the Diocese has given me the valuable opportunity to support the mission of the church.
Okay, great. So let's get into this book. And I'm so glad you suggested that I read it. I'd never heard of it. So today, Nicola and I are going to be talking about The Deadeye and the Deep Blue Sea. It's a really thought-provoking look into modern slavery, something that our diocese is really proactive about. So in your role, Nicola, you help develop policy around modern slavery and raise awareness of it. So for those who haven't heard much about it, could you just explain what modern slavery is, please?
Sure. It's useful to think of modern slavery as a spectrum of illegal activities. So on the one end, it extends from human trafficking across a whole range of activities that are illegal, both under domestic laws and international conventions, such as debt bondage, forced labour, forced marriage, and deceptive recruitment practices.
Okay, so a lot of things that, are not very nice practices at all. So the back of the book describes the book as a graphic memoir of a Cambodian man held hostage for years on a fishing vessel, the true story of human trafficking. When I read this book, it really made me think about some specific issues around modern slavery, things that I hadn't considered, and things that in a way implicate me in the whole chain that I hadn't thought about how I actually help human trafficking to kind of continue and flourish. And for example, this is about fishing, and like I'll never buy fish again or order it at a restaurant without thinking about this book and how my purchase is making an impact on these people. So how did this book increase your interest in the subject matter?
Like you, I'm far more interested now in the moral dimension of my purchasing decisions than I was before. As a consumer, I reject as gravely wrong any goods or services that are tainted with slavery. And I know those words sound really dramatic, but I've paraphrased part of a prayer that we use when we meet with ACAN, that's the Australian Catholic Anti-Slavery Network, and internally when we meet with our own Modern Slavery Liaison Committee, we begin with the prayer from a prayer to Saint Paquita. So she was a victim of slavery herself and ended up in religious life. So we pray to Saint Paquita, and one of the parts of that prayer is about praying that we will reject as gravely wrong goods that are tainted with modern slavery, tainted with slavery.
Yeah. Okay, so a book like this, it can be really thought-provoking and emotional because it really deals with some very confronting issues in the world, not just slavery, but how things like war and poverty and corruption, how they're all like linked. And this is a graphic novel, and it makes it even more confronting, I think, because the pictures in many cases say more than the words. So I've just got an example here that I might just hold up so people who maybe don't know what a graphic novel is can see. So the pictures, in a way, tell the story. So could you explain, like when you were reading this book, how it impacted on your mood? Like how did it make you feel, or maybe it inspired you?
Actually, it was a little bit of both. It's certainly very disturbing because it puts a human face on an issue that I'd previously felt quite distant from.
Mhm.
But it did also inspire me. It inspired me to share what I'd learned about modern slavery with my family. I relayed the story to my daughter. I didn't let her read the book. I don't think that it's age appropriate for young people. As you say, the novel is very graphic, and there's significant trauma experienced by the characters in the book, and recognizing that they're not just characters, it's actually a true story, and
Yes.
they're real people. So I shared the story in an age appropriate manner with my daughter. I gave it to my husband to read, and then we talked together about how we felt about it, and we really changed the way that we look at our own purchasing decisions. So there are a number of tools out there that can assist you to find out how the suppliers you usually purchase from are dealing with the risk of modern slavery. So we've stopped buying from some stores that we know have poor practices embedded in their supply chains, and it's just about being more present and mindful to where the things we purchase come from.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and the impact, like I said, that we have on that whole chain, that if we don't buy things, it'll stop the practice or help stop it. Okay, so in the book we meet a lot of characters and get small glimpses into their lives and their motivations. And I suppose it's interesting for me because, I mean, we can be a bit preachy in our privileged lives about the people doing this. So I suppose if you had to meet one of the characters, who would you like to meet and why would you like to meet them?
I'm going to be a bit cheeky here and change your question.
That's okay.
Because I met the author.
Wow.
So I think the obvious answer is you'd love to meet the author, and I did. I had the privilege of meeting him at the 2019 Modern Slavery Conference that was convened by the Sydney Archdiocese. So his story and his trauma was very real to me. I heard him speak through an interpreter of his trauma, and subsequently purchased the book. So I guess storytelling is different in different cultures, and I really learned how powerful spoken storytelling can be, as opposed to the book stories that we're used to in our culture. So it was very, very humbling meeting him, given that it was a modern slavery conference, and he was the guest speaker. We knew that he was going to speak about his experience of slavery, and even though I knew that's what he was going to talk about, that did not prepare me to hear his first-hand account. And it was very confronting, but he was an incredibly inspiring man, because he was very humble and he was very gracious, and he wanted to connect with people. He wanted to connect them with his story. He wanted to help people to understand. And I will never forget hearing him speak his first-hand account of those experiences.
And I think when you read the book, you get a bit of a sense of him as a person, because in no way does it lay blame on anyone or judge anyone. It's just, this is what happened to me. This is what I went through, and how I never gave up hope and how I survived. And I think that's what you're trying to say, that for many of us, we'd be outraged if something like this happened to someone we knew, but there isn't that outrage or anger. There's none of that. There's just, like you say, wanting to get the message across. So, yeah. So again, on a question about the graphic novel, lots of people pick up a book based on the cover. That's what gets them to buy a book to read it. So looking at this cover, do you think the cover does the story justice? Would people pick it up and read it, or do you think a different design might have been more successful?
I think definitely the cover would entice people to pick up the book. Given that it is written and illustrated by the survivor of modern slavery, those illustrations are his creation and they vividly express his experience. He is a true artist. So the images are very compelling and confronting, and they're also very beautiful.
They are, yeah. I'll flip through a few.
Little bit of a story
to show people.
The author's a tattoo artist, and he shares that with others who are enslaved with him, and so his technical capacity as an artist is really quite incredible, and his message is very much embedded in those images.
Yes, and like you said, like in the book, we see him surviving with his ability to do the tattoos in some ways, that helps him. And I think they say in the introduction to the book that, I can't remember who saw the pictures after he'd survived and suggested that he then write the story and they make it into a book to put that message out. So it's an amazing kind of story that led to the book being created. So a successful book usually stays with people long after the last word's been read, the last page has been turned, and this is obviously the case for you. So could you sum up how the book's broadened your perspective, how it's changed you?
The book definitely exposed me to different ideas about people. The author was working illegally in Cambodia when he was trapped into slavery, and the book helped me really to understand the desperation that drives the conduct of illegal immigrants. So I guess, for me, the story was again more than I thought it would be. I understood that it was a story about slavery and that I would come away having a deeper understanding of slavery, but I also came away with a much deeper understanding of what drives a person to become an illegal immigrant, and the depth of their level of disadvantage and desperation. So that's something I'll carry with me too.
Yeah, it definitely does help connect all those dots. It's not just people want to come to Australia or whatever. There's a whole story behind what's led them to take this desperate action.
Yeah, I think that's connected to your earlier comments about, you learned from this book about how a lot of those social forces are interrelated, and it really does put slavery in a context.
Definitely. So there's just so much you can talk about issues that this book, The Deadeye and the Deep Blue Sea, raises. And like I said before, while it's thought-provoking, it is a gentle call to action. So we do need to finish up. So last question, the Diocese is launching its modern slavery webpage very soon, I believe. So why do you think this is an important initiative for our diocese, and why do you think it's important that people read this book?
It's really important for our diocese because it's deeply embedded in Catholic social teaching. If we look at the key principles from Catholic social teaching, they include human dignity, respect for human life, preferential protection for poor and vulnerable, human equality, and common good. So it's given us a really strong platform for getting behind the modern slavery initiatives. And I think that in terms of why is it important for people to read the book, I think, again, the sort of experience I had, where I understood that this was an issue kind of academically, but it was distant from me. If you read the book, it helps you to get more connected with what the issue is and how it impacts individuals and their families and their communities, and ultimately the supply chains that we all rely on.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you, Nicola, and thank you, as I said, for taking the time to talk to me. This really is an important initiative, and I think rather than seeing it as something that's a hopeless kind of a cause, you have shown me, and this book's shown me, that every little thing we do gives hope to others and, hope to the world, and that we should be hopeful people, not to give up on issues like this. So thank you for taking the time, and
I'm glad you enjoyed the book.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mandy. Bye.